IT is critical to the public sector, handling everything from X-ray images to criminal records. But this huge range of different functions presents some real challenges for public organisations. Every organisation provisions its own IT systems around its own unique needs, which makes bringing innovation into the entire public sector a real challenge. The past years have seen many initiatives to try and lead faster innovation for public organisations, but it remains a work in progress for many.
I think there are a variety of challenges that the public sector face today. The one that we're obviously all aware of is the constant pressure to reduce costs from within the public sector. As a result of the political landscape, there's often pressure to take money out of public services. That said, there is also constant pressure within the public sector to push more of their services through digital channels in order to reach wider audiences. So that's some of the challenges that we see, specifically in relation to the work that we do with the public sector.
A lot of organisations won't be in the cloud yet because there's either a stigma around it, or there's a fear, or they might just not need to change right now. The thing about any of the bubbles before they burst is there's a lot of people that want to get onto the bandwagon and they suffer that pain for the early adoption. Then you've got the people who we're helping with now who are essentially going on to a tried and tested platform. The people that are a little bit late to adopt, as I said earlier, they might just not have a need yet. Or they could fear of security, the fear of giving it to somebody else, which is a strange fear, because a lot of the companies, especially the ones we speak to, and the ones I've worked for in the past, already use hosted IT. They already go to another company, which that's all cloud is. The problem is people decide to come up with a name for something that's been done a long time. It is hosted services. There's more of a wrapper around it, but for a lot of companies, it's just that they think that their stuff could be anywhere. And the fact is, it's not. It's in trusted, tried places. We know where they are, and you can move it. The public sector's got many challenges in this day and age. Mainly it's around costs, cost savings, cost reductions. Obviously with taxpayer money, it's a constant drive as well, not just something you can do once. But also we're finding with our partners in the public sector that it's getting more and more difficult to find the skilled resources that they need for the price point that they can afford. And we try to help them with these.
Our typical customers up to date have been largely on the ambulance services side. We started off with the trusts, primarily South Central Ambulance, East of England Ambulance. We are working with quite a few more. But what we've found as well is that there's a large number of private ambulance companies that also have the paper to digital requirements. They want to get rid of the paper. They don't want run sheets. They don't want vehicle checks. They don't want all those bits of paper clogging up the system, because they're very hard to use. If you've got multiple stations, it's hard if the paper's out of sight. So what we're finding is that a lot of smaller private ambulance providers, such as Surrey Ambulance, who we know, are looking to come to us to help us to migrate them from paper to digital. And it's not just about patient records, it's about audit, it's about compliance checks. Is my vehicle clean? Have I got the number of drugs I said I've got? Have I got the meds that I should be checking? Have I got all of the things that mean I'm compliant? So the sort of companies we're looking to work with are those where there are compliance requirements that drive them. So they have to report to other people, such as the CQC, such as ISO organisations. And those companies are finding more and more that our products are what they need to meet that compliance.
Public sector invested extensively in IT. Out of all the sectors that we work with, I think an overwhelming percentage are going through some sort of digital transformation at the moment. And that's going to be great news. I mean, it really does focus on efficiencies, it provides better public services, and really that's what their aim is, that's their main business to do that. So we think they've invested very heavily in the areas of IT. But of course, digital transformation comes with its own challenges. With a larger digital footprint, it leaves them more open perhaps than other sectors to attack and vulnerabilities. So cybersecurity really needs to be considered, and we're seeing perhaps spend in cybersecurity is a bit more challenging, I would say, than perhaps spend generally in IT. So we tend to see it more focused in around services and operational IT as opposed to cybersecurity.
Security is a critical concern for all public organisations. Citizens' information needs to be held securely, both to protect their privacy and to protect our national infrastructure. Especially as much of our IT moves out into the cloud, the need for security becomes even greater. The past few years have seen dozens of major data breaches in the private sector, and public organisations must expect to face the same kind of attacks.
If an organisation is considering moving into the cloud, they really ought to be considering security in the same way as they apply it to their own internal systems, or even perhaps to their external systems. The walls between external and internal are disintegrating all the time. You know, we're working in a much more open environment, and so security no longer is a perimeter thing. It's more about how do I secure that data, that system and that user in the context of how they're using that system across, whether it be cloud, whether it be sitting on the enterprise or sitting in Starbucks.
Cloud as a delivery paradigm is a very powerful vehicle for not just the public sector but all organisations, in terms of the opportunity it provides for organisations to move away from perhaps having their own IT departments building servers and building services, to actually start to look at the things that are on offer in the cloud arena. And obviously over the years there is a much richer array of services being available through the cloud, and essentially building their business services through existing commodity services in the cloud. Now there's still quite a long way to go in terms of line of business services, in terms of how individual organisations meet their specific business requirements. But the kind of standard stuff like being able to word process, being able to work with spreadsheets, being able to send and receive emails, all of those cloud services are now common across all organisations, or becoming common, and you no longer have IT departments worrying about spinning up an email system. They actually just say, no, I'm going to go and use one of the available cloud services. And with the availability of those cloud services, that's created a market where you can now choose. You don't have to pick the one that you've always used. You can choose any of the products that are out there, and you can flip and change between them at any point. There is clearly going to be a cost associated with that and a time scale, but in theory and in practice, you can actually now do that in those areas.
Legacy systems can be a stumbling block for public organisations. These are older systems deployed to an in-house server that has become critical to daily operations. Transitioning from an old system to a new one without interrupting operations is a complex challenge and comes with some real risk. For executives, it can be difficult to make the leap from proven, effective systems to new hosted solutions.
A lot of organisations who have, maybe the phrase should be archaic, but legacy, very old systems, bespoke application development, there is a decision that needs to be made by the organisation that hosts that. The fact is that there is a total cost of ownership for keeping that application as it is, irrespective of whether you move it. 15-year-old applications will break. The people that wrote them won't be there anymore. The languages they used will no doubt have changed, improved, things are moving faster. For a lot of organisations seeking to move, what we'd say to them is, have a look at what your real requirement is. What is that piece of software actually doing? Is there another version of it? Is there someone else? Have they made one very similar that you can migrate to? There are middleware, there's migration assistance for a lot of different data backends, a lot of different languages, but there's nothing that beats a good, strong team of people who understand the customer's requirements, looking at the current solution and making tactical, strategic, but pragmatic ideas, opinions, suggestions to move that into a more modern way of working. It doesn't have to be the cloud, but it definitely has to be more cloud aware, cloud native. We're talking about rapid development. We're talking about breaking things down into their succinct components. So instead of trying to migrate this massive blob of something that people once understood and no longer do, you're breaking it up and saying, well, this little segment of my infrastructure does this job. Right, here's an alternative, or I'll migrate it, or I'll make something new, doesn't matter. Move that, prove it works. You've delivered some value. You've minimized your risk. You've delivered some value over here, now pick something else off. And I advise organisations to just go through, look at what they're actually trying to do, move what's needed, re-architecting it. Whatever's left, either they don't need or they just can't move, and deal with that afterwards.
So I don't think there's one technology that's a silver bullet that's going to fix all issues to do with security. You really need to look at multiple approaches to dealing with any system. And a lot of that really comes down to thinking about how that system is deployed, how it's operated and how humans use it. Introducing different types of security solutions, different approaches to dealing with how you deal with that system with security in mind will help you build a much more cohesive and secure system that you're delivering. If we take it back to the basics, if you look at patching, if you look at strong password management, if you look at security awareness training, those kind of basic elements will help you mitigate the vast majority of issues that you may have, that you may face regarding cybersecurity.
A challenge for all digitisation programmes is the hearts and minds of the people using the system. But frankly, I would say the success or failure of most digitisation comes down to whether or not the people using it adopt it or reject it. What can we do to minimise the risk of problems during implementation? Well, I recommend a few things. Firstly, recognise that the people collecting the data and the people using the data in their reports often have almost conflicting motives. The people collecting data just want to get the job done. They want to do their job well and collect the data. The people reporting want to keep adding more and more questions so they can get more and more reports. What I recommend, start by listening to the people collecting the data. Get your first implementation to closely match what used to be on the piece of paper. Make it familiar in terms of its layout and its terminology, and then take a journey towards more and more data collection. Another challenge with digitisation, and I laugh when I say this because I give it a little nickname, it's called Death by 1,000 Apps. Time and time again, I come across organisations who've considered digitisation, quite rightly, they are trying to digitise, but they've passed the responsibility for that digitisation to department heads. And those department heads have just said, here are my 7 or 8 forms, I'm going to digitise them by buying this app, this app, this app. And what you end up with is sometimes 20, 30 apps within a large organisation, some of which overlap each other, none of which talk to each other. And all I would ask is, when people are doing digital projects like this, they are building it from a central strategic platform. The procurement department, the IT department, whoever needs to be involved, needs to be looking at this strategically.
Usability is a major concern when delivering a new system. The public sector employs a huge number of people in different roles and different levels of technical knowledge. When systems are procured, they have to be accessible to their intended users, while remaining secure against others. Finding the right balance is essential in any public IT project.
Security is a very difficult conversation to have with a lot of people. It is a balancing act between flexibility, usability, and security. You turn a computer off, people are not going to hack into it and get the information off it. There's no power to it. You take the hard drive. You'd put any air gap between things, you're getting more and more security, but you're getting less and less usable. I think what a lot of organisations need to do when it comes to security is have a realistic attitude towards the data that they are hosting. I don't know the facts, but you could argue straight away that not every bit of information for every organisation is sensitive. Protect what needs to be protected and protect that well. Even on public cloud, there are ways you can use public cloud and isolate the resource so that only you on your network can get to it. It's as if it's private at that virtual layer. Underneath, it's still shared. If that is a problem because the sensitivity of your data is so high that you need to guarantee isolation, go to a provider that can give you that guarantee of isolation.
IT is important for any organisation in terms of delivering its services. Essentially, it's an enabler to help it deliver its business goals and objectives. And when you start to break down what IT actually can do in terms of providing opportunities for you to explore new markets, but also take advantage of your existing customer base by interacting with them in terms of things like your customer services that you offer, it's essential that most organisations have got a well-defined IT strategy that underpins their defined business goals and objectives.
Cybersecurity is critical to public sector, predominantly because of the type of information that they carry. Obviously, type of information that they tend to have is personally identifiable information. Of course, they hold medical records, criminal records, as well as business information and civic plans. And of course, when you're getting into the larger central governments, much bigger projects and much more sensitive data really at stake. So it really is vital for them because they hold so much sensitive data that they address security really well. I think they have challenges that come with that, mainly around budget constraints. Of course, they really need to think hard about where they're spending their money. Obviously, it's public money. They need to make sure that they get the balance right. But we're seeing that cybersecurity is perhaps still underinvested in public sector, and really the types of data that they hold, it needs to be perhaps given a little bit more weight.
One of the specific problems with keeping it digital is where you meet a real natural boundary. So, for example, when it leaves one organisation's IT system and needs to get onto another organisation's IT system, without the protocols that allow for data interchange, you are going to come across a situation where the information needs to revert back to a PDF or a paper document. And this is indeed one of the reasons why digital systems will always have to produce physical documents. My concern in my job is minimising the amount of exchange of information by turning it into a physical document. And one of the ways we can do that is by expanding the boundary of who is seeing the digitised information. So to give two examples, one example is external. Instead of sending a PDF once it's reached the end of an organisation's data systems, instead of doing that, give a login to the system, to the GP surgery or emergency department or whoever's interested in that data. Give them a login so they can come and search and find that data. What I see time and time again is that those logins aren't provided. And where I would like to encourage people to improve that is look at their licensing model. Right at the beginning of a process, license it so that external parties can see into your systems. The second one is internally. People within an organisation cannot be licensed to see information that is useful to them. So what happens is the people who are licensed revert to producing Excel, PDF, and they issue them by email to hundreds of other people who are interested in that information. I'd like to see that being resolved by better licensing discussions.
We seldom think of the public sector as being quick to adopt new technology, but there are more factors at play than just a lack of investment. Public organisations can't afford to buy technology that doesn't perform to its expectations. Every organisation needs to find the right time to invest in new technology and be aware of the risks that early adoption brings.
I think public sector can make some benefits from being early adopters of technology. Again, it's about it's the appetite for risk and the fear of risk as well. There's no one answer to any question. There is no one approach to cloud. You'll often hear people talk about SaaS, PaaS and IaaS, so software as a service, platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, as if there's some competition. It's about the right tool for the right job at the right time. If a government department has got an appetite to make a more modern system and they're happy that there is a risk things will change, go for it. With all the languages, software languages that are around at the minute, the release cadence is becoming faster and faster and features are being added quicker and quicker and people are sometimes not even waiting anymore because they just know something's coming. But again, we start small. The early adopter train is something you've got to go on lightly. You pick, and we're doing it now, even with our current Department for Education customers. We are helping them project by project look at what's right.
I think the security landscape is going to become far more integrated in the coming years. We're going to see systems that are talking to one another that never communicated with each other before, and that's going to introduce many more challenges. We need to really understand how individual systems, part of a more collective overall system, are secured, and of course the weakest link in the chain there is the one that's going to be exposed the most. We're seeing new technologies almost on a weekly basis that come into the security landscape. We've seen this year things like web isolation, which is new to the market, which is detaching the user from the whole web experience and meaning that the security doesn't happen within the user's environment, but rather within an isolated sphere outside that user's environment, which is kind of an interesting approach. We're seeing new ways of securing cloud instances as well, where developers can spin up systems very, very quickly, but instantly we can wrap security around that as well so that they're immediately secured from the moment that they're operational.
The exciting thing is we are seeing finally real change in terms of paper is moving to digital. I don't think we're going to get to paperless very quickly, but we're certainly getting to less paper much more rapidly than I ever thought would happen, in my working life even. The reasons behind that are partly to do with government intervening. They're also to do with the cheapness of certain systems such as tablets and just IT in general. The costs have become much more competitive. What's going to happen next is you are going to start to see people just culturally adopting a rejection of paper and an adoption of systems, even if it's slightly awkward for them to do so. And real momentum is building in that. And that's exciting for us at DocWorks, because we've been working on the digitisation of paper for 10 or more years. And what we're seeing now going into the future is that even people who've always thought that they'll stay on paper have come to us saying, I want this on a tablet, I want this on my PC. And they've started to understand the power of the data that they can get, the power of the reports that they can run, and where they're informed, they've understood that once that data is in their hands, they can pass it to other people in order to share that and improve the services that they provide.
While we see a lot of technology around us on a daily basis, business practices don't always keep pace. Many industries that we see as being very advanced still often rely on traditional paper-based systems to document their work. Especially in large organisations, change takes time, and often seemingly small changes require very significant work to other systems to enable it.
We think that our products will be used a lot more for things like ISO accreditation. So where people are using paper audits, we think that our product could take those paper processes and we can transform those paper processes to digital.
One of the areas that excites me personally is, as we become better and better at gathering data, making sure that data is in systems that will allow us to make informed decisions, there'll be less and less reliance on healthcare professionals to intervene with complicated decision making and diagnostics. And one thing for me, which I think is a huge opportunity for us, is that those healthcare professionals can then start filling some real gaps that we've got in mental health care, which is a much harder thing to do through data analytics.
I believe the way that IT is going to evolve over the next sort of, say, 5 to 10 years, I hope personally that we see the IT landscape become much more of a commodity landscape. Whether we can achieve the full vision of that, it will be interesting, but I personally believe we can, that in the future I can be sat there as a CEO or a CIO of my company and go, how much am I spending on my IT? And if I moved it to a different service provider, how much would I save? The challenge there is going to be how much information have I got and how quickly can I move it from A to B. But again, if I design my services well to use cloud services, then moving things around, it isn't a simple case of lifting everything in a physical data center, putting it on trucks and dropping it into a brand new home. Actually, I'll be able to move things around much, much quicker. I'll be able to change my service endpoints and my integration endpoints far, far easier.
In 5 years, EAS Cloud Services should be a centre of excellence within the Midlands with cloud agnostic automation and orchestration. We want to give our customers, especially in public sector, cannot focus it enough, where people are light on budget, skill sets harder to get. We develop tooling, we develop middleware, we develop processes and policies to help people run their cloud systems. If we can get within the next 5 years to be that company that you know, that trusted name of, I don't know which cloud provider I want, I don't really know how to get onto it, but I know this company can do it, that's where I think we should be.
Manufacturers certainly will be looking at building security into their products from the ground up. They'll have to look at that. It's certainly something that is going to give them a competitive edge. And people are now asking questions around that. And as the general public become more aware, they'll be asking more questions, I think, and making more savvy choices in terms of what they're buying. So we definitely, I think, will see that moving forward. But I think there's still a little bit of a perception out there that the security is somebody else's responsibility amongst the general public and to a certain extent among users and employees of business. You know, it's somebody else's job to protect me. And I think there has to be an understanding out there that to a certain level, it's our job to protect ourselves. You know, we'd never for a million years, you know, leave our checkbook lying around because that's a physical thing. You know, people are very protective over that type of thing. And we need to make sure that people consider the digital or online transactions in the same manner.